All right, welcome on back to another episode of the Culinary Road Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Melnick, alongside Fred Mullins. Fred, nice to see you.
Jeff, how are you? Good to see you again.
Doing well. We have a Thanksgiving food episode. Last week we did Thanksgiving beverages. We're talking Thanksgiving food today. So
it's a Thanksgiving palooza.
Sure, whatever you want to call it.
That sucked. Sorry. Can we start over?
Nope, keeping that in. Like I said, a great show coming up. We have our old friend, honorary third member of the show. I guess we could stop calling him honorary. I guess he's
pretty much the third member of the show.
Right?
Yeah.
So Garrett Vandermolen's going to be on later on. We'll talk about some Thanksgiving traditions and a couple of memories and things that we've had in the past. So we have a nice segment coming up there. It's
for what you're not expecting, folks. So
right.
Perk up when he starts talking.
Right. Yeah, we got some interesting twists and turns in the next segment. But before we get to that, we got to do our top three.
Have to.
So it's kind of a no-brainer, right? Coming up on Thanksgiving, 2 days away here. So we got to do our
three favorite Macy's Parades floats. I know, right? So obvious.
Right, exactly. No, not that. We're not going to do the Macy's Parade floats. We're going to do our top three favorite Thanksgiving side dishes.
Yep.
Not including dessert. So this is just sides that go with
the bird. Go with the main event.
Yep.
So these are on the periphery.
Right.
So
did you go first last week or did I with the drinks? I don't remember. I don't know.
I went first. Sure.
All right. Sounds good. Well, sounds good. I'll go first. You sort of have to hit the main ones, right? But then we'll talk some of the variations that we have. Number one, I think with a bullet is going to be stuffing.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. Yeah. There's a bunch of different variations though, which we'll always be able to find. My favorite that I've made over the years is a chestnut sage vegetable stuffing.
Yeah, and you like your sage.
That's yes, right. Big fan of sage. Yes.
Yep.
You know, I've done it with sausage before. I know you talk about doing oyster stuffing that you've sort of done, and there's a lot of people do like chorizo, and there's
it's some kind of bread, right? So that's your base, and when you think about that, you can put almost anything you want in it. A lot of people go with like the seasonal appropriate thing, and I mean chestnuts all day long, and sage. I still got sage kicking around in the backyard. I'm pretty happy about that.
Oh, yeah, that'll be around. That'll be around through the winter. That'll come back around.
Yeah, we've been lucky with that. But that's I think the beauty of stuffing, and it's just the more of it, the better, right?
Right.
I think you can put what you want in it, but that's your recipe and it's your pick. So it's chestnuts and sage.
Chestnuts and sage. That's what I'm going with for that. And sometimes I'll stuff some of it in the bird, but then you have to have a whole pan of it just on the side.
Yeah, if you put that in the cavity, even if you put like a 50-pound bird, that's not enough stuffing.
Right, you got enough for like 6 people.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you got to make sure you have enough for leftovers and all that good stuff, which we'll talk about later on for sure. But
Thanksgiving does not exist in a vacuum. Without leftovers, there is no such thing as Thanksgiving. So I'm just saying.
All right, so that's my number one pick.
We'll get into that later. Yeah,
that was sort of an easy way to get started. So number one, mine.
I have to go with a classic again, and I know everybody's thinking a different version of it, and they're always on the table too. But scallop potatoes au gratin, whatever you like, the same thing. And everybody's like, oh, mashed potatoes, but mashed potatoes are okay. They're fine. But I mean, I want the layers of cheese. I want that crusty top on it.
Right.
That's always on the table.
Really?
I mean,
so yeah.
And again, like you said,
we go more au gratin potatoes around Christmas, not really on Thanksgiving. We're always mashed potatoes.
Okay. It's always kind of been on our table. Maybe it's Florida thing. I don't know.
No, it's probably a lot of people's thing.
Florida, land of the potatoes.
I don't think it's exclusive to the Mullins.
I grew up in Florida, disclosure, so there you go. It's confusing.
But yeah, a good au gratin potato or a good scallop potato,
right? And they get better, like the stuffing. And I failed to say this about the stuffing. The longer that's to some point, the longer that's in the fridge and the more it sits there, the better it gets.
Oh yeah.
And lasagna is the same way, and actually so is soup. It makes a great breakfast side the next day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Fried egg on top of it.
Yeah. Giddy up. That's my number one.
All right, I guess we're on to my number 2 pick. Uh I'm gonna go Brussels sprouts.
I had that as my number 2. Okay.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
do you do yours?
I'm taking Brussels sprouts. So you got to get them nice and crispy. So
Yep.
I'll typically cut them in half so you have that flat side. Got to have some pork product of some sort, so pancetta or bacon or something,
Mm-hmm.
something along those lines. Depending on how big of a batch I'm making, I might sear them on the flat side individually, in a saute pan or something. But in the interest of cooking large meals, like in this case, I'm just gonna cook them. I'll probably blanch them first.
Mm-hmm.
So just cut them in half and then cook them in salted boiling water for a minute, minute and a half, just until they're nice and tender. And then lay them on a sheet pan. You have that rendered bacon. Make sure you get that bacon fat in there, or the pancetta fat in there. Salt, pepper, high heat in the oven, 400, 450 degrees, till it gets that nice caramelization on there. Sometimes I'll add onions and things like that, but Brussels sprouts, some sort of pork product, nice char on there. Make sure they're not overcooked where they're mushy. They should have a little bit of bite to it, a little bit of
Yeah,
crunch.
it should be kind of almost crunchy.
Yeah.
Somewhere, yeah. I
Yep.
totally agree. Brussels sprouts. I mean, come on. They're delicious. So good for Thanksgiving.
Yes. Yep.
I think it's one of the few vegetables that actually makes a strong appearance.
Right.
Everything else is starch and fat based. Although you put fat in there, I have to commend you. You do need the bacon. I usually put a little red chili flake in mine too.
Sure.
I like it. And it's fun to finish it with some sherry vinegar.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, because too much is too much, but it helps cut through that a little bit. And the rest of the meal's so heavy.
Even just to squeeze a lemon on there, just that little bit of acid.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I just like the nuttiness and the kind of the brininess that the sherry vinegar has. But yeah, lemon's a really good call. I like that.
I've now taken your number 1 and your number 2, but what do you?
Well, it was my pick, not necessarily number 2, but it was definitely a pick of mine. I love them. I know some people feel pretty strongly about Brussels sprouts, but I think maybe they haven't had them done the right way. Be my guess.
Right.
And no, I'm not picking the green bean casserole. No. So on the number 2, I am a little hung up because now everything got a little scrambled with your pick. But my mother-in-law makes an absolutely killer carrot souffle.
Carrot souffle.
Man, it is. I love carrots. We usually have roasted carrots too, which are dynamite. But this carrot souffle, it's kind of, it's almost like the sweet potatoes, like the roasted sweet yams, whatever, roasted sweet potatoes. Now this doesn't have any marshmallows on it, but it has that roasted sweetness because it's that root vegetable.
Yeah.
She'll put toasted pecans on the top of it, a little salt, and it's just light, fluffy, and airy, and it's just so good.
Is it like
such a nice compliment?
Is it a big, like one big pan that you sort of scoop from?
It is. It's I'm not really sure what to call it. It's like a casserole dish. I want to say it's about 10 inches deep and maybe like 12 wide. It's like a 12-inch square thing, and she nails it. I mean, it's like a proper souffle. It's just so fluffy and light, and it's on this side of being custard, or is it bread? I love it. I think when it was my first Thanksgiving with my wife, she had it at the table, and I hadn't had that before. I mean, I had souffle, but I hadn't had that before, and I ate like half the bowl. When people were looking, I just kept scooping it. It's so good, and she has to make it every Thanksgiving, otherwise it's not Thanksgiving. That's my number 2 pick, carrot souffle. Right. A little bit of an outlier, but it's really good.
Yeah. I'm gonna stick with the keeping with the traditional sides, but with my little twist on them. So I'm gonna go with cranberry sauce, but I'm gonna do the cranberry mostarda.
Yeah, because mostarda is where it's at.
Yeah, so mostarda is basically a white wine syrup with mustard seeds and mustard powder in it that you cook the cranberries in, and you can serve it warm or cold, but it's basically, I do a 3-to-1 ratio of wine to sugar. Depending on how tart the cranberries are, you might need to bulk up that sugar just a little bit. But you just basically make this mustard syrup that has, mustard seeds, mustard powder. I do ginger, like ground ginger.
Ooh, that's a good call.
Cinnamon, cinnamon sticks, cloves, all those sort of autumnal spices.
So is it kind of like a simple syrup when you're cooking it down that way? Okay.
Yeah, you don't cook it quite down as much to the point where it's syrupy consistency.
Right, you want it thick, yeah.
It's still fairly liquid.
Yeah.
Then you throw the cranberries in there and cook them up until they break down, and taste it for seasoning. You might, depending on how tart the cranberries are. If you're doing fresh cranberries, they could be pretty tart. So you might end up
lots of but sugar's fine. It's
right.
Thanksgiving.
Right, exactly. And then like I said, serve it warm or cold. I like it cold because I like to have not only different textures in a meal, but I like to have
different temperatures
as well. So I like to have, the cold cranberry on top of the turkey that's usually like room temperature by the time you eat it, with the warm gravy on top, and all those, that sort of
it's nice. It's like you can taste all the layers a little better because one of them is sort of like a punctuation. That's a good tip too.
So that's my number 3. So I'm going stuffing Brussels sprouts, cranberry mostarda or cranberry sauce.
Man, you went classic. So I'm not going to give away what's coming up, but we do things a little differently in our house. And I feel like when you get to the fall, corn, right? Late summer through fall, everybody thinks corn. I love elote, but you don't want to. An elote, if you folks don't know, it's roasted corn on the cob. It's usually slathered, and follow me on this one, slathered with mayonnaise, lots of cilantro, chili powder, a healthy amount of it, and like a squeeze of lime. And it's the best way to eat corn. It's a lot of fat. It's absolutely delicious, but it'd be hard to have that on the table because there's already so much stuff on there, and having like 15 ears of corn is going to take up like half the real estate that you need.
Right.
So we make a salad out of it. It's not quite as heavy, and we usually use creme fraiche instead, but it's, it tastes like fall, but it adds it kind of cuts through all the other heavier dishes, because I mentioned scalloped potatoes and then a carrot souffle, which isn't heavy, but it has a rich kind of tone to it. In this, crunchy, you get the sweetness from the corn, but you get the spice mixed in with it. It's such a good enhancement. And I tell you, if you put that, I know it sounds weird, put that on the sandwich the next day, because you're just jamming stuffing on there too, along with everything else, it's dynamite, man. Dynamite.
So
that's been a part of the mix of.
What do you do? Do you grill the corn before and then cut it off?
You can, or you could roast it, if weather permitting. But if you grill the corn and then you take that, basically put it upright on the table, and you just take a knife and cut it, cut the kernels off, and you just mix it in with the salad bowl. And you just spoon out corn that way. You roast it, and then you kind of add the accoutrements like a salad dressing afterwards, because you're not leaving it on the corn. Little creme fraiche, this will serve about 12 people, so it kind of creme fraiche to eyeball it, because you just want it coated, not heavy. So we're like 3 tablespoons, give or take a little bit. Squeeze a lime to taste, so you want a little freshness to it, or like a little acidity, but you don't want it to take over the dish. A little salt and pepper, clearly not too much, because you're putting, like we put just some ancho chili powder in there, a little cayenne. What am I leaving out? I feel like I'm leaving out something.
Cilantro.
And a little smoky paprika, and then clearly fresh cilantro, and mix it all together. And another trick we like, and this isn't necessarily classic, but we put goat cheese in there.
Oh yeah.
As well. Cojito cheese, which is the fresh Mexican cheese, is usually part of the mix. Feta cheese will work really well if you like that, if you can't find the cojito, but goat cheese just adds this kind of richness and tartness to it.
Yeah, that little tangy bite.
And I love goat cheese. So that's it. That's my 3. A little weird, but I am. So there you go.
Yeah, that fits, right?
Right.
Well, if you have, for our listeners, if you have your top 3s, send them in to us. You can visit us on culinaryroad.com, culinaryrd.com, and let us know what your top 3 Thanksgiving sides are. Nothing else to do now but to get on to our conversation with Gerrit van der Molen here, huh?
The Gerrit van der Molen.
Van der Molen. Coming up next, our conversation with Gerrit van der Molen.
This next segment is brought to you by the Anchor app. Haven't heard of it? Let me tell you something about it. If you haven't heard of the Anchor app, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. There are creation tools that allow you to record, distribute, and publish your podcast straight from your phone. You can even edit too. Anchor will put this on Apple, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms. And this is with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Isn't that amazing? Thank you, Anchor app. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Cheers.
All right, welcome to the program. Long-time third chair. Great to have you back, Gerrit van der Molen, once again on the program.
Woohoo!
Feel the excitement already.
Yeah.
So we are in the middle of our Thanksgiving episode here. So Thanksgiving's just 2 days away as this is being as this episode is released.
Yeah.
And we're talking turkey. We're talking all things Thanksgiving, and we wanted to have our trusty third chair in here to share another perspective, so you don't hear just Fred and me talking about whatever every week once again. So we really want to focus on Thanksgiving traditions and kind of dive into what your families have done over the years and what things you can't miss out on and what things you frankly don't want to deal with every year, but you sort of have to as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about dessert once we get through it. So Garrett, as the honorary third chair, and we're not going to call you a guest because you've moved way past that stage. But why don't you start us off with some of your family's traditions and kind of
some Thanksgiving knowledge. Drop some Thanksgiving knowledge on the folks.
Wow. Yeah. Yes, some science.
So it's funny because when you contacted me and said, "Hey, we're going to do this. Do you want to sit in with us and chat about it?" I was like, "Yes, I definitely do," because Thanksgiving for me there's a lot of ritual that's involved with Thanksgiving. And I got to think that that's got to apply to like maybe 85% of, at least in the estates of families, like where it's like, okay, there's certain stuff that we do this every year. And if we don't do this, we are fucking up Thanksgiving by not doing this.
Right.
So like, whether it's omitting a certain dish or omitting, the special plates that you use or the silverware that you get out, whatever it is, it's an important time. And it's like, it's a time of year, like almost more so than Christmas, and hopefully that's not sacrilegious, where you're like really thinking about like family and friends, because there's Friendsgiving, that's a whole thing too, as well. Right.
Yeah.
So that gets applied to it as well. So I think like in terms of like as a holiday, and if you want to say it like an American holiday, it's up there right at the top. I would almost put it at number one in terms of like, it's very, very unique. And it's a special time where you just kind of like are reflecting on like how lucky you feel to be alive and to know all the people that you know, and you want to share it with all those people. So it's a great holiday. And I think that's kind of what this episode is a little bit about, right? Is that excitement about it, where you're like, okay, I'm not going to fuck up the turkey. I'm going to have great wine. I'm going to have great food. And I'm going to have a bunch of people surrounding me that I really want to spend time with, whether that's family or friends. So, for me, I get excited about it every single year, and every single year is different because it is a little revolving cast. There's people that show up consistently, like my wife and my kids, but there is a revolving cast of family members or friends, right? People who are our friend on Thanksgiving were like, hey, I know you're not doing anything, or you're, can't go home this year. Why don't you come to our house and hang out with us? So I have a set of rituals like that definitely involves like place settings and certain things that need to be on the menu. So I will start off with saying that.
All right.
And maybe we can delve into some specifics.
So you always do it at your house? You always host?
No. Well, as an alleged adult, I've been hosting more often than I did in the past. But for me, Thanksgiving has been a little fractured in terms of with my family, not having an extended family, where my father started dating a woman after my mother passed away. So that was strange, that aspect of it. And then I had my wife's family, and then and then we had our own family. I think we kind of were in this Bermuda Triangle of Thanksgivings. So we've done all of those. But in recent years, it's been mostly us. And I will say that in the last 10 years, and not just because of COVID, it's been a little bit more of like isolationist Thanksgiving, which has been my wife and my kids, and we haven't invited anybody over. And it's funny that this timing of this episode that we're talking about, this is the year that I'm actually inviting a bunch of other people outside of just the four of us to come for Thanksgiving. And I'm super excited about it because I'm like, this is going to be great. We're going to make this turkey that we bought from the farmer that we know out in Hardwick, Massachusetts. You're going to love it. I'm going to have a great wine pairing. And without a doubt, 100% there's going to be pecan pie at the end of the meal, because if we don't have pecan pie, it's not Thanksgiving. You can say the pumpkin's the pie, but pecan is the pie.
But you can have both. You can have the pumpkin pie.
You can, and we will, and we will.
I'm with him.
But if we don't have the pecan pie, I will be bitterly disappointed and salt all.
We got to talk more about that pie, because a little, like, half of my family is super Southern, so pecan pie was like always I used to get it for my birthday when I was a kid, kind of thing, but it's always been part of Thanksgiving. Yeah, I'm with you. You kind of have to have well, anyway, I should let you finish, but I'm in total agreement.
No, I'm done. Go. I'm done. I've talked too much.
Yeah, I'm going to start from the end and work forward. And it'll kind of fit the theme. I used to really not like Thanksgiving. I dreaded it. Didn't really work for me. I didn't understand what all the fuss, when I was younger, I didn't understand what all the fuss was about for like a meal. Like, you had the family element where they didn't get along, and as a little kid, you're like, what do I do with this? Nothing bad. Nobody had fist fights as far as I know, but it was just always this kind of weird tension. And I'm like, it's not Christmas, so you know what? I don't care. And as I got older, when I was working, in restaurants and stuff, especially when I was running the market, the day before Thanksgiving was a full-on ass kicking, and we were so busy. It was exhausting. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was great because
at the market in particular. I'm sure
people were super gracious. There was one guy named John, big as a house. I mean, the guy must have been like 8 feet tall, but he made these peppers every year for us, and they were amazing. They were stuffed with anchovies, and like he had prosciutto in there, and they were spicy and sweet, and he brought them in, big smile on his face. People were super cool, but we opened like 2 hours early, closed 2 hours late, and like you hardly had time to go to the bathroom, and it's not a joke. And then you close for Thanksgiving, and you open Friday, and Friday was almost as busy. And in between all that, I had to get in my car and drive hours, me and my wife, and go like be social and everything. And I was like, oh, why is Fred tired? He's always tired when we see him. And it's like, get fucked. I work all the time. I mean, I didn't say that, but it was like, you got to be kidding me. So it was something I didn't have a chance to enjoy. And then as I peeled back from that kind of insane schedule, I really appreciate spending time with people now. But our twist on Thanksgiving is we want to be excited about it. And I'm with you. There's a few little things that always have to be part of the menu. Pecan pie, absolutely. There's a new tradition. We discovered something, and it's not our discovery, but we stumbled across it in Trader Joe's a few years ago. Something called Kringle. It kind of looks like a flattened bagel. It's pretty big. It's like I don't know, like 14 inches wide, almost the size of like a large pizza. It's got a hole in the middle, and it's got just real simple, like, sugar frosting on the top. But it's like marzipan almond paste in the middle, and it's like a croissant.
Oh, that's a banquet letter. That's a Dutch thing.
It is a Dutch thing, absolutely.
It is a Dutch thing. That's
yeah,
and it's a Christmas essential to have a banquet letter when you're Dutch. Like you got to have one.
They're so good. And, they're like, we have it for breakfast the next day, but that is like a must now. It was weird. It was like, I was looking at it, I was trying to figure out what it was. And I just remember the woman working there, she leaned over and she goes, trust me, you want to buy more than one of those. Just grab them while you can. I'm like, all right, that's an endorsement. And I'm like, yeah, I get home. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to crack one open now just to see. And I'm like, wow, she was right. This is amazing. And we went back and bought 2 more because you can freeze them. But now that's a part of the rotation. But we look at it as a feast. That when I say me and my wife, this is a feast, and we really want people to enjoy it and be part of it. We don't want anybody to be disappointed, but I feel like, we cook and we provide really good wine, good drink. I feel like we're pretty good hosts. You'll have a great time. And the idea is like, let's just have a feast.
Yeah.
So we like to have oysters. We typically almost don't do turkey ever. We've done duck before. This year, we're going to do a lobster pot pie with like a phyllo dough thing on the top. So we always kind of take it in that realm. And my wife's, her big thing is she always has a menu. She has these beautiful little menus printed up. She has a pun for whatever the dish is. Then on the back, you flip it over and it's like, what are you thankful for the person to your left or your right? And it's really, that's all the tradition. The rest of it is we just try to take it out of the box. I will say there's always bubbly. We usually start with spritz, which I think we talked about on a separate episode.
Right.
And that's kind of the arc of it. But if there's no pecan pie at the end, it's not Thanksgiving to me. And the best part of that pie is when you get up in the middle of the night, even though you're still full, and have another slice when everybody else is sleeping. It never tastes better than that. So that's kind of our hook on it. And we usually keep it pretty small. We're both only children, so we have extended family, but it's not a huge get together. So we're like, I don't know, 8 people, a little more max. Sometimes
I think
friends.
it's really
yeah,
it's fascinating that you bring up like working on Thanksgiving Eve
yeah,
and Thanksgiving. And I think, one little thing that we could probably shed an insight on, since we're all like in that thing,
Yeah.
like, you in retail and Justin as a chef, it's like, it is like, that's the time of year where it's like, it's kind of screwed up, because you've got people coming in and sharing stuff with you, but then you've got this myriad of people that, there's a lot of transportation happening on Thanksgiving, of people traveling and going to places, and all those people like inevitably end up going into a retail shop or a wine shop, and like, okay, I'm going to Thanksgiving's dinner tonight and I'm completely unprepared, and I need to get something. I need to get some food, or I need to buy a bottle of wine. And that conversation, that dialogue starts when the doors open at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Yep.
and goes, if you're open till 9 o'clock at night, it goes all the way through nonstop till 9 o'clock at night, or till 10 o'clock at night on the day before Thanksgiving. If you're like with the chef and you're working on Thanksgiving, there's a whole contingent of people that are like, okay, I am not cooking. I am going out to dinner. Right. And you can address, say something about that, Justin, in terms of like, that's a whole nother philosophy on how you approach Thanksgiving, where it's like, okay, I'm not cooking. Someone else is going to be making the meal. I'm not going to deal with it. So there's a whole subculture actually that exists around this holiday that I think a lot of people aren't really cognizant of when they think about it. Everyone has their home things, but there is this other aspect of a massive amount of people
right
that are out, consuming and preparing before and the day of the actual holiday itself.
Yeah, when I was on Martha's Vineyard, I was there for 5 years, and we were open every Thanksgiving, every Christmas Eve, every Christmas Day. So, all those holidays, all the tradition that I had built up before those days was all gone at that point. I mean, I just, we'd have to do Thanksgiving either, the girls, my 2 daughters and my wife would come to the restaurant sort of for like the last seating or the first seating, and just sort of like eat real quick, and I'd come out and say hello, and then run back into the kitchen and get everything going. So that was a bit chaotic. But growing up, we always went to my grandparents' house, and that was it, and that was just sort of the thing that we always did. And then as we all, there was 5 kids growing up. Now we all have significant others and families and all that stuff. So the tradition for me has become, what are we doing this year? Because it's just been different almost every year. But I do remember the first Thanksgiving that I came out to Pennsylvania. We're talking like 17 years ago now. And I was with my now wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and we stayed at her sister's house. And her sister's now husband, my brother-in-law, they had just started dating too. So we're all sort of fairly fresh in our relationship. And we were driving to my wife's parents' house, and on the way there, Emily and her sister started telling Dave and myself that they go around the table and everybody has to say what they're thankful for, which is like sort of a normal, it's like a traditional thing with a lot of places. But we were like, oh shit. Like it's an hour-long ride, and I'm like starting to stress. I'm like, I mean, I barely know these people. I've been dating, Emily for not even a year yet. Like, what am I supposed to do here? So for the hour drive, I'm like sweating it. I'm like, oh, am I supposed to say that I'm thankful for her?
Did I pick the right thing?
Yeah, or like, should I try
no
to
pressure.
be funny or? So again, we get there, and everyone drinking wine and whatever, and we sit down to the meal, and I'm kind of looking around. I'm thinking like, all right, this is the time. What am I gonna say? They were just fucking with us. That's not something that they do. So I was stressing about it for a good 2 hours straight, and then we get there, and it's like time to go, and I'm starting to get nervous and everything. I'm like, oh You son of a
Were you like thinking, hey, whatever, okay, I'll take a little bit of that, I'll take
piggyback
some
off
of
of
that.
that? Oh
I don't
yeah,
want
I
to be
had all kinds of
first.
things,
I
all
don't want to
kinds of
be
things.
first.
So that was my first Thanksgiving with Emily's family here in Western Pennsylvania. That was when we were going to school in New York. So, it was a 6-hour drive out here, and then we spent the night with her sister. Whatever. This is going back almost 2 decades ago, but it was I vividly remember stressing out that whole ride on the way here. And now I've obviously last year with COVID and everything, we didn't really get together. But I did a bunch of Thanksgiving meals to go at the restaurant. So Thanksgiving morning, my wife and I were at the restaurant, and people were coming in the back door, and we had they were calling and the girls were there too, and we all just hung out at the restaurant. And then we did Thanksgiving dinner, just the four of us. After everybody left, we just ate in the restaurant. So we just had we had a nice little turkey meal that I made for everybody else. We just made a little bit extra, and the four of us ate there, opened the bottle of wine, and hung out.
Kind of nice.
Yeah, but it's really been every year's been a little bit different. Obviously, like I said, on the vineyard, I worked, and then we'd have to do Thanksgiving like the following Monday or whatever. And then, growing up was a whole traditional. Every year we did the same thing, and then all of a sudden, everybody sort of did their own thing, and then we didn't really have a plan.
Your story makes me think about my first Thanksgiving with my now wife, who are like the classic New England family and descendants of Miles Standish. And the first time going to Thanksgiving at their house, I cannot tell you how nervous I was to go there and have a meal with like her entire family. I knew her. We started dating in college, and we knew each other from that, but I'd never been to her house. I'd never met her parents before. I was going to meet her parents, her brothers, everybody. And it was just like one of these things where, I'll never forget coming into, like, it was everything that you could imagine about like what a classic New England Thanksgiving would be is what this was like. It was very like textbook with the turkey, the bread pudding, the cranberry sauce, and then also a lot of like interrogation of me. Like,
right.
So who are you that is dating, our daughter and our sister and our, this whole thing.
Right.
But it ended up being pretty darn awesome. But I still like to this day, like, you were talking about like traditions that are associated mentally with it, and I always will have a picture of like sitting in their house and in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, or New Ipswich, whatever, which is actually New Hampshire, but sitting with this like classic New England family and having this fare and scalloped oysters and all of these like really traditional like hearty things that you associate with. I remember the food, but I also remember the who is this guy?
Right.
That's a good memory. It's funny what we connect with the holiday, right? That little moment. I mean, that's your first Thanksgiving with your wife. I remember we went over to her Aunt Betsy's, which it was Andover, Massachusetts, like, again, super New Englandy. And I just remember the whole day being a blur because I'm like, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth. Keep your opinions to yourself. Let's eat and get out of here as fast as we can. Don't drink too much.
Right.
And I just remember all the nerves. And I remember watching her make a pumpkin pie. And I don't remember anything about the meal other than like it was a relief on the back end of it. But I remember sitting there at the table. There was a yellow chair in the other room, and it's just all these weird associations. And I didn't get thrown under the bus with any kind of like, hey, make sure you have something prepared for what you're thankful for. I didn't have to deal with that.
Right.
But it was a big family, and it was like, interrogation city. It was like rapid fire. But I survived it. We're still married. Yeah. I don't know why she's still married to me, but she is. So that's a whole other story.
I think there's also like other like phases of like, if you're lucky to stick around and live long enough, you go through like your phases of Thanksgiving. And it seems to me like at least the three of us that are here, talking and pontificating for this podcast, we're all kind of in that phase, like we're starting to define our Thanksgiving traditions based on everything that we went through prior to us, like being the hosts and the people that like, okay, we're putting the spread out. And that's also a very interesting place to be in because you're starting to make memories for whoever comes to your Thanksgiving feast, right? And it's kind of a cool thing if you think about it, and what you've like taken out of all of your past experience, either with your now wife or you went to your friend's house for Thanksgiving or whatever. Because I think everybody steals a little piece of everybody else's stuff to make their celebration, right?
Yeah, because there's something that clicks with you, like, oh, I didn't think to serve that, or like I had a friend who made like andouille sausage stuffing one year. I'm like, oh my god, I ate so much of that, I thought my face was going to burst. I just kept shoveling it in, and he must have used like 20 pounds of butter. But like, we do that all the time, and he always comes to Thanksgiving, and he always has to make that. And I think a couple of years ago, he's like, can I please stop making that, make something else? I'm like, absolutely not. But yeah, it's funny, you take these little bites, and they literally they stick with you. And it's really easy to get caught up in all the hard work and everything, but it's just sitting down and enjoying a feast with friends and family, loved ones, whatever. And like you said, there's Friendsgiving. We did that a couple of years too, because traveling can be really tricky. The industry we're all in sometimes doesn't allow for it, and I had some great experiences doing that too. Maybe not always the best food, but there was always plenty of wine to wash it away. And it always ended up having a blast. So I guess it can be whatever you want it to be, and I think that's what I like about it. Maybe that's why we kind of take it into a non-traditional area, but to each their own. Again, you're just supposed to enjoy it, I think.
Yeah, well, you're talking about the food it's not necessary. I mean, turkey's not necessarily the tastiest of I mean, it can be if it's done really well, but it can also be really bad. But there's always a lot of it. That's
the thing. There's too much.
Right. There's always too much of everything, which sort of brings you over to the leftovers. So we were always at my grandparents growing up. My grandmother would always, meal number 2 would always come around, and she would always make us sort of open-faced turkey sandwiches on a slice of Wonder Bread. And it was just whatever you wanted on there, sort of warmed up and stacked up. And so to this day, kids go to bed and everything, and I make myself. I typically don't have Wonder Bread around, but I'll make that open faced sandwich, and it'll just remind me, of my grandmother making that when I was a kid. And sure enough, one of my brothers will send me a picture of their open faced turkey sandwich that they're having at 10 o'clock at night after they put their kids to bed and all that stuff too. So that's another one of those things that just always comes around. But leftovers are kind of a big talking point as far as Thanksgiving goes. You always send people home with some leftovers and all that kind of stuff.
Or you covet them and hoard them, and like, okay, I can't give you too much of this,
right?
Because I need to have enough food for myself for the next 3 weeks.
Right. And you got to make the turkey soup, and
it needs to be turkey based and sausage stuffing, and some gravy and some cranberry.
Yes.
The cranberry is important. Turkey tetrazzini was the big one as I was a kid. Like that was my mom's thing. Like that was a huge one. And for the 3 weeks after Thanksgiving is like 2 meals every week, turkey tetrazzini. It's like, oh, I really like this.
Well, can I ask a question? I heard that dish so many times growing up as a kid, either from family, maybe on TV, old reruns or whatever. What is exactly it? I actually don't know what turkey tetrazzini is exactly.
It's
I think I
noodles,
know, but I don't
turkey and cream and cheese and if you're lucky, the little frozen peas you throw in there. It's basically the meatloaf of the leftover world, but there's pasta involved.
Right. Okay. So that's the base. The pasta is the base. I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know about the peas, but that makes sense. There's probably peas left over.
Well, that might be like an extra thing, but I feel like it's essential at this point.
Right. You got to health it up somehow, right? There's something green in there to kind of lift it. Well, while we're on this, and I know we always do, part of our show is we have our favorites, and Justin and I go back and forth on them. But Garrett, I think you might have said it, but if you have a favorite leftover, like I always make this, I actually almost look forward to this as much as I do the actual day. But it's like, Justin just mentioned his open-faced turkey sandwich, and we're going to take pie out of it because I think that's too easy. But like, you're having leftovers, like, do you have a go-to that you just like this, now it's Thanksgiving, or Thanksgiving can end now kind of thing?
Yeah. Taking pie out, the turkey sandwich is essential. And, when we were talking about like having those family get-togethers, so when I went to my wife's family's Thanksgiving, her mom would make Parker House rolls, and Parker House rolls are like these, legendary, epic, they were in some magazine and the whole country caught fire and had them. But apparently in my neck of the woods, when I was growing up with my mom and my dad, we never had them. So I had them for the first time ever at her house. And I remember, staying there for a couple of days the next day and making my turkey sandwich with these Parker House rolls, a little bit of mayo, a little salt and pepper, a little cranberry sauce, a little gravy, and a little stuffing, and it was like, ooh, just the sandwich. I would be hitting the couch all over again just by having this. It was awesome.
Right. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. Everybody laying around and falling asleep watching the football games and all that stuff too. But watching football on Thanksgiving, I think, is as traditional as the turkey.
Yeah, and I also have a theory on that. Everybody talks about the tryptophan that's supposedly in turkey, but I think the reason people are falling asleep watching the football games, it's always the freaking Detroit Lions.
Right.
There's nothing to watch.
Right.
Just throwing that out there.
Because what the outcome is going to be. They're going to lose.
It's a given.
Right.
The game's already over. Come on.
except for back in the day when Barry Sanders was playing, that was always fun.
Different, but it's been so long.
Oh yeah,
fair enough.
Sorry, Detroit Lions fans. I should not be so presumptuous. You're not always going to lose. It just feels that way sometimes.
Most of the time.
It seems like it's momentum that can't be stopped at this point. I'll leave it at that.
Right.
But Barry Sanders, you're right. So there's I'll take back that a little bit. But I'll take that back a little bit.
That's been a little while though.
It's been a minute. Yeah.
That's before you sit down and start eating and you have like lots of wine and liquor. Before all that happens, you're like, hey, maybe this is the year Detroit's gonna win.
Oh, the optimism.
Sorry, Detroit.
I don't know how many people from Detroit are listening, but maybe we'll the one guy we had, we're gonna lose him.
Come back. This is the year.
I can hear him. I hear him unsubscribing now.
Right.
It's gonna happen this year. I know it. I can feel it. This year is different.
I hope you're right. Yeah, I didn't know the Kringle. That's kind of my thing now. I have to have it the next day, and it's part of breakfast now. So I'm going to use Justin's terms. I'm bridging Thanksgiving with the day after with some
marzipan,
food.
Man.
Yeah, it's right. Wrong. There's something about it.
Yeah,
something about it. Yeah. How about you, Chef? Other than the open face.
Yeah. We've talked quite a bit about my habits of standing in front of the open refrigerator and
just boxer shorts.
Yeah, just eating. So I definitely get into just eating the cold turkey, just right out of the packet, whatever, the Tupperware, or whatever.
Also delicious.
Yeah. Right.
No extra carbs, all protein, no carbs.
Exactly.
You're going keto, man. You're all set.
So yeah, I'll probably stick with standing in front of the open refrigerator and sneaking bites of whatever I can dip my.
It's actually more fun like that, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Whatever it is, it just tastes better always.
Right.
We've added turkey enchiladas. That's a new addition. Also, kind of tasty, kind of fun.
Are you doing green or red sauce?
Green sauce.
Yeah,
green sauce.
Thank you, sir. I knew you'd be on the right side of the fence. I knew it. Oh, that sounds so good.
They are good.
Do you prep the sauce that? I mean, like, do you have that just ready to go so you have it for the next?
Oh yeah, it's all pre-planned. It's like
strong.
We know this is going to be part of it because when at least in the recent times with isolationist Thanksgiving, where it's just the four of us, we know there's going to be a shitload of extra turkey. So like before I even bring the bird home and we cook it, I'm like, okay, what's our plan for the leftovers?
What's the week's menu look like?
It's so ridiculous, but that's the way we think, right? So we're before we even have the Thanksgiving meal, we're already planning like, okay, what are going to be the other 4 meals that we're going to make with this, incredible amount of turkey that we're going to have left over because it's just 4 of us.
Right, the 22-pound bird for the 4 of you.
Right.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to try that. I'm gonna have to try turkey enchiladas because I love enchiladas, and that sounds freaking amazing.
They're pretty tasty.
I would imagine. I know you're a heck of a cook. I'm not surprised.
Bake them, cheese, turkey. I mean, come on.
Okay, what are you drinking with it? I had to. Sorry.
Well, whatever is available.
Doesn't matter.
But I will say that the cold beer does go very well with
I was going to say it's hard to beat.
There's a track record there, there's a track record.
There's history.
That goes back to the last episode when Fred was talking about Pacifico at the end of a meal.
Right. Pacifico is actually that. There it is. There's the perfect pairing.
It just needs to be ice cold and it'll get you there. Yeah,
exactly.
so it's I wish I could. It's so freaking hard to find in Maine. I think they're trying to drive me out of the state. I don't know what it is.
It is weird. It's not an East Coast thing. I mean, if you go out west and you're in California,
totally. That's where
yeah.
I went to school out there, and that's kind of where I got hooked on it, because we would get these $2 fish tacos, and then you get a beer for a Pacifico for 50 cents.
Yeah.
You know, a poor college student, you're like, I'm in heaven. Anyway, Getting off subject. Get my joke.
Well, so I didn't think we were going to go down the road of turkey enchiladas and Pacifico, but here we are.
Oh man, I think Garrett might need to open a food truck.
That's going to be everybody's new Thanksgiving tradition.
No, I love it.
But another
the next career, right? That's like I've got the next 6 careers lined up already.
I love it. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. I'll keep you posted.
Yeah,
right.
I think another Thanksgiving tradition that people should have is listening to Speed Fossil while eating their meal.
You're too kind. You're too kind.
So you have where are you at with the new LP and all that stuff?
Well, all right. So it's done. And I've reached a deal, but I can't talk about it.
All right.
So
okay.
All I can say is that it's going to come out in the spring.
Okay.
And the label that I've signed with is going to do CD and digital, and I'm going to press the LP on my own. So there will be vinyl, and they're both going to come out at the same time. And I'm super excited about it. You know, the people that I'm working with who are going to put it out are really terrific and artist oriented, and are going to promote it and all those things. You know, it's going to be really nice to have someone else talking about it besides me.
Right.
So good for you. That's great. You said spring, this coming spring. Right?
Yeah. So we're debating whether it's going to be February or April, but that's, you know, one of those two. You'll see it. It's going to happen.
That's fantastic. So real quick, and if people, you said they're going to do the digital and CD, but people wanted to buy the vinyl, or I guess the CD for that matter, is that going to be available on your site through Bandcamp?
It'll be, I will have it available through my site, but it'll be also available through them. Like, we'll take anybody who wants to buy
it. Right on.
So when you mention your site, that's speedfossil.com, right?
Correct.
That's the best place for everybody to.
And it goes right to Bandcamp, and there'll be something there. You know, I haven't figured out the logistics of how to link it with the label, but I'm almost 100% positive there's a way to do that. You know, it's a new era for me. It's going to be the first time that someone else is going to put it out, and you know, it's exciting. It validates it for me, and I'm just really happy that they're excited about it and they want to work it, and hopefully, you know, it'll get into more people's stereo systems or digital devices or whatever, you know.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Well, that's the plan. So go check it out, speedfossil.com. You can keep up to date with all the latest things that they're doing, and you've been doing some live shows and things like that, getting back into the swing of those things as well. So looking forward to hopefully I'll be able to get out and see one of your shows one of these days, but in the meantime I just have to follow you through Instagram.
You're gonna have to come to Massachusetts because it's not a touring organization at this
point. You can make it up to Portland. I believe in you. Let's do the State Theater. Come on, man. Do it.
If the opportunity gets presented, I will. I promise.
All right. Well, you got to get on that, Fred. You got to make some phone calls.
Oh yeah, I'm so connected in the music industry. Let me make some phone calls for you, Garrett.
All right. Well, we'll let you go on that note, Garrett. But thanks again for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on here, and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this. It's a great podcast, and it's always a pleasure to talk with both of you and discuss whatever topic. I feel like it's a stimulating conversation, and hopefully we impart something, either, you know, a piece of wisdom or a piece of comedy,
or turkey enchiladas as a tradition. Turkey enchiladas on.
So thanks for letting me be part of it.
So I'm going to list the new traditions for everybody: Culinary Road podcast, background music, your dinner music, Speed Fossil, Pacifico, and enchilada, turkey enchiladas the next day.
Perfect.
That's my top 4. I mean 3.
Awesome.
Top 3 new traditions. There we go. Foot and mouth disease. Anyway, happy Thanksgiving, gentlemen. It was great.
All right.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Enjoy the holiday, fellas. All right, we're on to our wrap up here. That was our conversation with Garrett Vandermolen. Always great to have him on the show. He's become more than just a guest, and it's nice to hear other people's traditions and Thanksgiving sort of go-tos and things like that. So I did not see turkey enchiladas with green chili sauce coming.
No, and he's ready for it. It's
not
like, hey, let's do this.
I love that.
It's I love plan.
I love how he plans his leftovers before he cooks the turkey.
I love that. And you know what? Of all the people we know, are you the least bit surprised?
No, not at all. Yeah. Not at all. He's he thinks those things through very well. But we are a couple of days away from the big day. But
I think it's
kind of our last chance to give people some last minute tips on cooking their turkeys. So we got a bunch of requests. Same question: what is the best way to prepare the turkey so it's not dry? I make people happy. I'm proud to serve it, and I can answer the question, but I'm severely underqualified since my whole non-traditional take on Thanksgiving is just that. And correct me if I'm wrong. Out of the two of us, there's only one chef on the show. Yeah, I may have cooked one or two more turkeys than you in my day.
I think just one or two. Yeah. So
but I think we're gonna have very similar advice to people. So this is
no, we're gonna get the advice from you because you'll make a good turkey every time. I might trip over my own feet and like, oh, it came out great, and the next time like it's pretty fucking dry. We don't want people to have that experience. So what's your recommendation, and kind of take us from soup to nuts, beginning to end.
Thing. Yep. So so that's our Ask a Pro segment coming up here.
That's Ask a Pro.
Ask a Pro. And as always, ask your pros questions. Go ahead and write in and send us all the questions that you want to hear the answers for. But we'll get right into the turkey. First thing is you buy a turkey and it's frozen for the most part, right?
Sure is.
So you got to plan that one ahead. You want that thing to thaw out completely for, multiple days under refrigeration.
Right. So you just put it in the fridge, right?
Yeah. Just let it thaw.
And how long? Would you like 3-4 days?
Yeah, at least. I mean, depending on the size of the bird, it might take every bit of a week to thaw out. Wow. I mean, if you get a fresh bird,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, if you get like a nice 25-pounder, that could take to be fully thawed out. It could take a good week.
Okay, well there you go. All right, folks.
So plan ahead if you're going to get one of those frozen birds. If you get a fresh bird, obviously you don't have to worry about that. Right. But the key, we've talked about seasoning before, with seasoning things and kind of ahead of time and letting it sit almost at room temperature so it absorbs the seasoning. So I keep it fairly traditional in that, sometimes I'll go the Italian route and just do olive oil, salt, pepper, heavily season it, because if you think of the turkey, the best part is always the skin, because people season it, throw it in the oven, and the skin gets all the seasoning, but the meat doesn't penetrate down to the meat. So this method is sort of a dry brine where you're seasoning it a day ahead of time, just heavy, a heavy-handed kosher salt, cracked black pepper, and whatever herbs, olive oil, spice, whatever else you like to put on there. Do it at least a day in advance.
And this is just the outside, just the skin.
Yeah, I mean, season the
cavity, right?
The cavity of it as well. If you're gonna stuff it, season it before you stuff it. But get that bird nice and seasoned a day ahead of time anyway. So that's sort of a dry brine where you're seasoning it, just a nice salt and pepper layer on top so that it kind of penetrates the meat. The other way to do that is to brine it in liquid. So I do a ratio of 1 gallon of water, 1 cup of salt, and a half a cup of sugar is the ratio. And then I'll do like fresh sage leaves and peppercorns and garlic and whatever other spices, pickling spices. You can put juniper in there or allspice, any of those things. But that ratio, 1 gallon of water, 1 cup of salt, half a cup of sugar, is the right ratio. Now it depends on the size of your bird, whether you need to do 2 gallons of water, 3 gallons of water, 1 gallon.
Yeah, right. Yeah, when you start reaching the 20 pound mark, you're going to need a big vessel and lots of water.
That's the other problem that you might have is finding a vessel big enough to brine it. So, I mentioned when we were talking to Garrett that I did turkeys to go. I did whole Thanksgiving meals to go for people, and they picked them up. I had them all hot and ready to go. They just picked it up, brought it home, and started eating. So, I mean, I think I made maybe 16 turkeys last Thanksgiving.
Wow.
and I can't brine 16 birds,
No.
right?
Right?
I mean,
you have a swimming pool out back. You
right.
just throw them in the pool.
It's just let them float in the pool. So I didn't brine any of those. I just did that dry brine. So I seasoned them up really well at least the day before, and really let that salt kind of penetrate.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. Like when we mentioned chicken wings we've mentioned them more than once, but I actually prefer that. And I basically put them out on the sheet and I'll season them and leave them like that at least for a day. They're in the fridge,
sure,
but they stay cold and they taste way better. So if it's me taking your advice, I'd way prefer to do the dry brine, because I don't have to try to find some kind of giant 10-gallon. I'm not using my trash can to put the turkey in and let it float around.
Right. And then you got to
do the dry brine. It's easy.
Yeah. Then you got to figure like the water displacement. So you drop the bird in there,
and everything spills out. That's of course.
So sometimes
so dry brine.
I'll brine it. So brining, the wet brine or the water brine, kind of ensures that the meat stays a little more moist. The chemical changes that happen through osmosis and everything, it's sort of making the meat, a little more moist as it cooks. The dry brine still has some of that effect, but it's really just heavily seasoning it so that it all tastes uniform throughout, so that the inside of the meat tastes as good as the outside of it.
Right.
But that happens over time. And then the key after that is not overcooking it. So you can't cook it at too high of a temperature. You also want to bring it up to sort of almost room temperature before you even put it in the oven.
You don't want to throw it in the oven cold. It takes way too long.
It takes too long. It's also, all that seasoning and everything that you have in there, as it comes up to room temperature, it's going to kind of activate a little bit more, and you're going to
it's interacting with the oxygen even more. The temperature does matter quite a bit. Okay.
So
all right, so let's just say, and I know people are going to have smaller birds, bigger birds, but let's just 20-pound bird to sort of as the high water mark. And like, all right, you got to cook a 20-pound bird. It's got to come up to room temperature or close to it before you throw it in the oven, and you don't want to overcook it. So what are you thinking temperature wise, time wise?
So you don't want to cook at too high of a temperature, because it'll burn on the outside and the inside will still be raw. So I typically, if I'm cooking a bird, it's going to be 325 degrees.
Okay. So it's not that hot.
No. Yeah. Maybe 350, depending on how your oven works or whatever.
Right.
If it runs a little cooler or whatever. So for a 20-pound bird, you're talking 4 to 5 hours, depending on how quickly it came up to room temperature. And that they always have those little things that pop out when the bird's done. Those
bird's done. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when that pops out. The bird's probably overdone.
Because they have to do that to be safe, right? You've got to get it past 165. I think is at the temperature. And
165 for poultry. Yeah.
And that kind of gets it right onto the dry side, unfortunately, right?
Right. So you have to consider carryover cooking and resting time. So I will typically pull a turkey out of the oven when it reaches about 155 or so.
Okay.
Maybe 150, depending on.
And you're just using one of those thermometers you can just kind of pick in, and you probably do it in like the densest.
Yeah. So you want to do it. The legs and the thighs cook. Okay. No, opposite.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
The breast cooks faster than the leg and thigh. So you always want to check the temperature of the leg and the thigh. That's the hard part with cooking whole birds, is even chicken or whatever. The breast cooks quicker than the legs and the thighs, because you got all that, it's all the muscle movement in there, and you have the bones in there. So, it takes a little bit longer, but you want to be safe. So you want to make sure you're not undercooking it and serving raw turkey.
Yeah, because it's not sushi grade turkey.
Anyway. Right. But if you pull it at, 155, if you're a little squeamish, and let it sit for a solid half hour before you even think about cutting it. Because it's that temperature, and you'll see it because, like I said, carryover cooking, that temperature will increase during that 20-minute, half-hour resting period. So it'll get up over 165. But if you pull it out at 165 or 170, and then you let it rest, it's going to get up to 180, 190 degrees, and then that's when it gets that like chalky dryness to it. But what I do at the end, so I said 325, and as it starts to get closer to that cooking time, I'll crank up the temperature just to make sure that
Crispy.
it gets that nice golden brown crispiness on the outside. And you can also, I've done a bunch of different things where I've stuffed butter underneath the skin, and you can put herbs and things, or if you're really feeling exotic, you can do like black truffles underneath the skin and that kind of stuff. So
happy Thanksgiving.
Obviously a billion different ways to cook it, whether you're stuffing it, what your stuffing is, all of that stuff. But I think it's really being involved in the cooking process. You can't just set it and forget it. You have to check it, turn it every once in a while, make sure you're basting it. Those juices that are falling out of it, you want to reincorporate them back into it, because that's all flavor and that moisture content.
Yeah. Okay. So people are going to be distracted. They've got guests over. Maybe they're watching football. Maybe they're watching something else, Macy's Day Parade, whatever. But how often we kind of roughly the time, we know roughly the temperature. How often should they go and check it? Like, this is an every 15 minutes, every half hour?
I probably early on, you don't have to check it that frequently, because there's not much that's going to happen in the first hour, 2 hours, whatever. But as it gets closer to that, you're going to want to check it more frequently as it gets closer to that end cooking time. And you're going to want to baste it more frequently during that. So the first hour, really not much is going to happen. Some of that juice might come off, but as you get closer to, hour 3, hour 4, there's going to be a lot of liquid that starts coming out. And that's when you get one of those turkey basters and, scoop it up and
go to town. Yeah.
And I mean, I would do that every 15 minutes for the last, hour and a half or so. And then maybe a half hour, every half hour before that. But, you really want to increase it as the turkey gets closer to being finished.
Yeah, just trying to give folks a template to work with. So I'm gonna review this. So if it's frozen, try to give yourself at least, it could be a week. You might need that much time, but put it in the fridge for a few days to let it thaw out. We're gonna go with dry brine because it's easier than doing a wet brine. If you folks want to do a wet brine, go ahead. But dry brine, whatever you want to do. Chef mentioned olive oil, salt, pepper. You do it on the skin and you do it in the cavity.
Right.
And then you let that come up to room temperature or close to it. Get your oven.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. I mean, it doesn't have to be
close. You don't want it cold.
Yeah, you don't want to go from a 35 degree or a 34 degree refrigerator right into the
325 degree oven.
Yeah, it's going to kind of shock it and give it a little bit of a tense reaction.
Yeah, it makes it chewy. It can make it chewy, right?
Right.
So then we want to cook it about 325 to 350, depending on your oven. Runs hot or cool. Obviously, the size of the oven is probably going to influence that a little bit too. And then we're looking at about a 4-hour cook time. You said
4 to 5. Yeah.
Okay. And
could take all of 5.5, but
it depends on the size of the bird. Clearly,
depends on the size of the bird.
But we're talking to 20-pounder.
20-pound, but also like that oven size and how efficient your oven cooks and all that stuff.
All that fun stuff. Yeah. And then when you first get going, take a peek at it. The first, every half hour. When you get closer to that 3.5, 4 hour mark, you're going to want to really start basting, pay attention, rotating it maybe.
Yep.
Kind of spin it around 180 degrees or 90 degrees and just kind of move it around like that so you get even browning. And then towards the end, when you say about a half hour left, you crank it up another 25 degrees. So
I'll go up to like 400 or so. Or if I'm getting right to the end, I might even throw it on broiler for
right,
just to get that nice crispy skin layer on top.
That actually sounds really easy.
Right.
If you do that, you're going to make a really good turkey.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people overthink it. At the end of the day, it's a bird, salt, pepper in the oven, cook it till it's done.
I was just about to say that. I almost talked over you, but like it couldn't be any easier. So there you go, folks. Right. That's kind of your foolproof turkey.
Again, there's a million different ways to do it, whether it's stuffed or if you're not putting a stuffing in there, I tend to put some vegetables in there just to kind of give it a little more flavor. So I'll throw in some like onions and carrots and things like that.
That's some nice aromatics.
Aromatic vegetables and some spices and things like that. Just because you're seasoning it from the inside and the outside. So
and that steams and gets in there once it starts getting hot. Yeah.
Right. So if you have your tips on other ways to cook a turkey, or if you completely think that I'm full of shit and that's not the way to do it, send your messages in. You can find us on Instagram. I am at Chef Melnick. Fred is at FMIV. And as always, you can find us at culinary.rd. So send us messages through there. And if you have another Ask a Pro question you want to send our way, definitely do so. We love to hear from everybody. You can also check us out on culinaryroad.com. That's culinaryrd.com. There's a bunch of other things on there as well, but you can find the podcast and contact us directly through there. Fred, I don't think I have anything else to go over this week. You got anything else?
One thing. Happy
Thing.
Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes. Yeah, we definitely want to wish everybody a safe and happy holiday. I know we got a little corny in this episode, talking about our memories and all that kind of stuff, but that's what this time of year is all about.
That's what Thanksgiving is. That's not corny. No, yeah. Nobody cried. We're fine.
Not yet. Fred, I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family as well, and look forward to getting together and doing this again next week.
Yeah, it'll be fun. And happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. And I'm sure you're going to eat well. We'll talk about drinking well. We'll talk to each other that day. I'll make some good recommendations for you.
Sounds great.
All right, man. Happy holidays.